Now from the panel discussion, a burning topic, we move on to national management of cough. Another serious topics to be delivered by Dr. Anand Sandilia, Director of Dr. Anand's Hospital, he has undergone his postgraduate training in pediatrics at GS Medical College and the prestigious KEM Hospital, Mumbai, has a lot of academic achievements to his credit and faculty in numerous events, and it runs to pages. He has organized and conducted over 100 PALS workshops in Maharashtra, Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh. He has held various prestigious posts both in the state and national levels, and he has been the national convener for PALS as well as the prestigious GEM course. Over to you, sir.
Very kind introduction. I don't think I deserve it. Well, I have changed the topic a bit. We all manage cough. I am now going to be addressing in this session what are the things that we do irrationally. To talk to an audience such as this about management of cough is a superfluous thing, because from what I recall with my past interaction with all of you, you're excellent, and you have already gone through the process of all this with Dr. Amdekar. We need to only revisit some concepts. So basically, what is a cough? A cough is a forceful expiration against a closed glottis, and it is a physiologic function which is meant to clear the airway of secretions. That's the physiology behind the cough. So what we understand from this is that a person whose airways are blocked or irritated will cough. That's the first thing we've understood. Second thing is that only those airways where a sufficient enough force can be generated can the cough be effective in. So your lower small airways, especially your bronchiolitis group, may not cough as much as somebody who's got a problem upper. We also know, again to revise for this audience, a doctor who cannot take a good history and a patient who cannot give one are in danger of giving and receiving bad treatment. What is this? So we are aware of this. So the main thing in the management of cough and being rational is to take a good history. If you don't take a good history, you're likely to miss the bus. That's the message. So what are the clues to diagnosis? If you know the cause, you can treat effectively. If you do not do, then the management is empirical, haphazard and irrational. So there are the clues that we think of, and we will revisit what you all have done in STEER about the respiratory microanatomy. It's just a revision for this audience because I know you have done it. I've seen the video of you all attending it. So if it's an airway disease, the child will come with a significant cough. If cough is not a significant symptom, that means that your airway is not the primary site of disease process. In the upper airway, you have a dry hacking cough, there is hoarseness, there is stridor, and there are suprasternal retractions. They will be present in various degrees, but these are how you categorize. So when a patient comes to me with cough and I am taking my history, I ask about the nature of cough and I make the child cough in front of me, and on the basis of the type of cough, I can already think of what disease process we are dealing with. Then you have the lower large and lower small airways. Lower large airways will have a wet cough, which is much more than the tachypnea. They will have wheeze and subcostal retraction. So in our previous session, in all those children who were wheezing, we knew that their lower large airways are involved. In lower small airways, you have more breathlessness than cough, which is usually mild, and there are no retractions. And the classic prototype is the child who comes to you with a bronchiolitis. Not recurrent bronchiolitis, but it's his first episode of bronchiolitis. If a child who looks to you like a bronchiolitis has a predominant cough, he's coughing lots, then he's likely to be in the wheeze associated LRI category or where there is lower large airway involvement. That's a clue we get. Classical typical bronchiolitis will not cough so much. Lung parenchymal disease, they don't cough as much as they have grunt intercostal retractions, crepitations, and of course you have a lobar distribution of signs. In pleura, cough is a very dry, minimal symptom. It's nothing major. They have more of pain, tachypnea, no retractions, and the distribution of signs is the pleural distribution, not lobar. So you cross lobes when you're assessing those signs, and it gives you a clue that you've got a pleural disease. Interstitium, they have mild cough initially, tachypnea and generalized signs, and as the disease progresses, their predominant complaint is not of cough, their predominant complaint is of breathlessness, of increasing fatigue and failure to thrive. And then later in the disease, they will also get a cough. Then of course you have your combination disorders where you have generalized airway problems plus lung plus interstitium, which tells you that this is a viral infection. The exception being mycoplasma, which presents like this but needs therapy other than symptomatic. And of course you have localized findings, pleuroparenchymal, which is a bacterial infection. So now, having gone through this whole process of microanatomy, when we assess a child who comes to us with cough, our first purpose is to decide whether it is an upper or a lower airway, whether there is other involvement of the respiratory tract or not, and then come to our conclusions. With this, your management becomes so much simpler. Some more rules about cough. We have to clarify terms, like when the parent comes and tells you my child has got a cough and cold, you really have to ask him, what do you mean by a cold? I have had patients telling me, yeah, he passes green watery stools with mucus in it and that's why he's got a cold. So, you may be treating the wrong end of the system altogether. So please clarify your terms. Or you have a child who comes to you with persistent vomiting and he says, both cough ho gaya, he's got plenty of cough. And when you ask him, you see the respiratory system, everything is fine. And then you ask him, how do you know he's got so much cough? He says, no, every time my child vomits, there's a lot of sticky stuff with it. So please clarify terms because you may be sent on a wild goose chase unnecessarily. Also, noisy breathing is considered to be cough by patients. So please clarify and get these terms clear so you know what to treat. When you have cough as a predominant symptom, if it is without fever, you have your hyperreactive airway diseases as your multi-trigger V's prototype. If it is with fever, it's usually viral infection or V's associated LRI, often both will cold. And this is your single trigger V's or viral trigger V's. That's what we discussed previously. Cough by and large does not signify a bacterial infection. There are some exceptions to this rule. We heard of one which was mycoplasma. Any other example that the audience can think of where cough is a predominant symptom but it's a bacterial? Chlamydia, mycoplasma, pertussis, fantastic. So more the cough, the lesser the need for an antibiotic and of course for a chest X-ray, because in the chest X-ray you don't see the airways. And often I am accused by parents that my doctor for this cough got a chest X-ray done and that also was normal. What sort of a doctor is he? Could not pick up an abnormality on chest X-ray. Well, you would tell the parent that I would not have done the X-ray in the first place because I am thinking of a airway disease. The exception is an inhaled foreign body, and that again you will get a story of a hyperacute onset of cough, which we often don't ask. We must make it a point that you as a routine ask whenever a parent complains of cough, how did it start? You will be surprised sometimes. I've been tricked at times. At times, acute bacterial URTI, which is adenoiditis and rhinosinusitis, will present with a cough, and you need to keep that in mind. And we just discussed this, an acute onset cough, which is worsening over a week. Think of pertussis. In small infants, you will have a contact at home itself, because they don't go out into the community. Finally, our last revision of the STEER thing is the approach to recurrent or persistent cough, and I hope it will put everything into perspective, our previous session and this. If you have a child who comes with a recurrent or persistent cough and they are grouped together because they are almost similar, you have to find out whether each episode is associated with significant fever or not. If it is a significant fever which is triggering of the episode, it is infection. That's our first conclusion. If it is infection, we need to find out whether it's bacterial or viral. If the symptomatology is generalized, it's a cold, it's a cough and breathlessness, then you have a viral story, no investigation, and at this point of time, if you look at your growth chart, the growth parameters will follow their own pattern. There will be no deterioration of growth, and that's a fantastic counseling tool to show the parent that this is showing a normal growth, so your child does not have a serious disease. Believe me, they get reassured. If the symptoms are localized, if it is localized to the upper respiratory system, then you are thinking of adenoiditis, tonsillitis or sinusitis. They will require investigation and therapy. and prolonged therapy for that. If the symptoms are localized to the lower respiratory tract, then you are thinking of grave diseases. Not Graves' disease, grave diseases like cystic fibrosis, immune deficiency, ciliary defects, tuberculosis, all will have deteriorating health parameters. And again on a growth chart, you will have an acute drop, your acute fast drop in the weight and height of these children. So these children require investigation. On the other hand, if you have a child who comes to you with recurrent persistent cough with occasional fever or no fever or mild fever, then you find out whether these are episodic episodes, is the cough nocturnal, and it tells you it's a hyperreactive airway disease. In the hyperreactive airway, you have two categories. You have your atopic one, in which comes asthma. Here you will get personal allergy or a family history of allergy, and that adds it. But remember, 30% of your children with asthma may not have personal or family history of atopy, and only the evolution of the disease over a period of time is going to give you clues. On the other side is the non-atopic who don't have allergy or a personal history. They will have frequent aspirations. They may have a GERD or a H-shaped tracheoesophageal fistula. They will have small premature lungs which have gone through some problem in the neonatal period, some ventilation. They may have a foreign body and also a left to right shunt presence like this. So this is your approach to recurrent and persistent cough, and I thought it was important before talking about managing a cough to understand how a cough evolves. So with a good history and a focused physical examination, we should be able to come to a reasonable conclusion as to what is the nature of the cough. Then treatment becomes a little simpler. So we must inquire about sudden onset. I said that's very important for foreign body. If there is breathlessness, noisy respiration, look at the child's behavior and look for tachypnea, chest indrawing and cyanosis. This is your rapid fast screen to decide what's happening. Now we come to the management of cough, and there are the principles that I would want to say. The most important thing is, of course, if you have identified the cause of cough, the specific therapy is needed, and of course some symptomatic treatment. Specific treatment cures the disease but may not relieve the cough till much later. And you have the parent who is least bothered about the basic disease, he is only interested in the cough, and you need to handle him. So ethically and ideally we are supposed to give symptomatic therapy so that the cough also gets reduced. The problem is, as you will see, that it's a very difficult thing to ask for. Symptomatic therapy should be harmless, it should be effective, and our motto should be to use minimum drugs to obtain maximum relief. So keeping this principle in mind, while whole section of bottles in the chemist shop can straight away be thrown into the dustbin. All your large combinations are not to be used. I am making life simple for all of us. Treat the cause if identified. Symptomatic relief. Aim is to shorten the duration of cough, prevent any complications, and between a daytime cough and a nighttime cough, the nighttime cough is worse because the parents don't get sleepy and get their sleep, and next morning they are very irritable with you in the clinic. If they have slept at night and daytime cough, he's coughing, but do something about it. But if they have not slept at night, you're finished. So that's a problem you have to tackle. Prevent complications. Cough syrups, question is, are they effective? Most are not. They are actually treating the parent's psyche rather than the child. Are you going to give round the clock prescriptions or SOS prescriptions? Only when needed. Ideally we should give SOS prescriptions, but practice is a different ball game. We'll talk about it. What home remedies can you suggest? Most of them try some things and come. You can also suggest some, and they feel that you're... of course, we must keep the child away from smoke and dust. Prop up the child while sleeping. These are your general measures. Just recently I was listening to a talk by a pulmonologist, and I was shocked to know, I'm just sharing it with you because it sort of shook me up, that your ordinary mosquito coil, the one which you light with this and which gives the smoke, one coil gives smoke equivalent to 100 cigarettes. I was shocked to know that. So coils are out, there is no question. In fact, even if you don't have a cough, don't use those coils, because you are likely to get a cough after that. So we prop up the child while sleeping, keep the room temperature comfortable for the child, loose clothing, especially at the neck, offer sips of warm water periodically, home remedy that often works is a mixture of honey, lime, and a few drops of ginger. So this keeps the parents also occupied, and it is harmless and it is effective in many situations. Cough syrups. Ideally, it should have a single ingredient. So you will have to really search in the market for a drug like that. There are very few. Maximum 2. Okay, we'll give you a concession. So, and again, those combinations have to be rational. You can't have a cough suppressant with an expectorant. That doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. And the child's respiratory center is confused. Do I cough or do I suppress? What am I going to do? So one of the combinations which may work is a cough suppressant with the antihistaminic if he's got some URI symptoms also. Give the right quantity to relate, and they should be in the right quantity relative to each other. Also their pharmacokinetics should match in the timing of dosages. So I mean, practically I am telling you that there is nothing like that in the market. Almost all of them are this thing. Don't have contradictory formulations, I just told you. If you have a spasmodic cough, then you can use a bronchodilator, and the drugs we use are salbutamol and terbutaline. They are safer than the others. Other types, you may use cough suppressant, dextromethorphan and flocodine. The point to remember is these are not to be used in children less than 2 years of age. They are meant for a dry cough. They are not meant for a nocturnal cough, which is a sign of bronchospasm. You don't suppress those coughs. So please ask a history, and they are to be given only SOS if needed, not otherwise. Mucolytics, guaifenesin in children, limited role. The only role they have is for the pharma industry, because their bronchodilators, when combined with these, go out of price control and they can charge what they want. Incidentally, these products make your prescription, I mean the syrup, extremely bitter. So there are very few preparations in the market which are plain bronchodilators, and you must know which they are so that you can use these. Extremely bitter, and your parents, the patients, the older ones don't like you once you start giving them these kind of syrups. They may not want to come back. In infants, we use bronchodilators with caution, and the message was very clear. Use it. If you have a response, then you may use it subsequently, otherwise abandon it. Codeine causes constipation. First generation antihistaminics cause sedation, and to me, even second generation and third generation knock me out. So I don't know what they say. Doctor, give this in exam time, the child won't sleep. I have taken it myself and I have crashed out. So I don't know how it works. I do not use xylometazoline at all or oxymetazoline because of risk of rebound congestion, and I have a friend who is addicted to this. I mean, he cannot breathe unless he puts these drops. So I don't want my kids to be exposed to this. If I want any nasal drops to clear the secretion, I will use saline drops. They are good. Now we come to the little unpleasant part. We have discussed general management of cough. What about irrational use? Use of cough mixtures in children less than 2 years of age. Use of cough mixtures with a first generation and a second generation antihistaminic. It doesn't make sense. Use of opioid-based cough syrups in children, codeine. Use of cough syrups containing promethazine in children less than 2 years. Inappropriate dosing, and using of combinations with counteracting mechanism, that is the suppressant and expectorant. So we won't use all these. Yeah. While researching this talk, I came across some very interesting write-ups about prescription audits in our own country. And this is one by Patel V on irrational drug use in India. I think we need to just examine this and also be honest with ourselves. When I did this, I realized that I was making mistakes. 999 prescriptions from private practitioners collected. Quality of layout was unsatisfactory. Identification of practitioner, patient, unsatisfactory or incomplete. Polypharmacy was the norm. Inclusion of vitamin, tonic, antibiotic, analgesic and some other drugs to boot. And it was worse with the adulterated physicians. We are much better that way. Branded medicines, of course, we don't have an option with this, because if you don't write a brand, then the pharmacist will give that brand which gives him maximum margin. So that is the reason why we will write brands. You can write the generic name in a bracket. we must standardize our format of prescriptions, and I must say that the Indian Academy of Pediatrics software for pediatricians is amazing. It's so good because it gives you prescriptions in the language the patient can understand. So you must use this. I have done it. I think Dr. Palniraman is also using it. It's very useful. We need to strengthen an independent mechanism of professional development of practice to ensure that patients are given evidence-based, cost-effective therapy. Now, what about over-the-counter cough syrups? Are they okay? What is the general view of the audience here? You think it's okay for parents to go and buy one cough syrup? Let's do a raise of hands. Only one person does not. OTC, do you recommend? You think patient phones you, you say go and buy some cough syrup from the market? So generally no. So some studies have been done, especially in the UK they have done this, and you cannot recommend as a first line treatment for children with acute cough because you may be missing a lot of serious illnesses. And what does it lead to? Unexpected infant deaths. And there is of course a marking on that which says consult a clinician before using it, but it's like that cigarette pack in which it's written cigarette smoking is injurious to health. You look at it and they still go ahead and take it. Similarly, this is ignored, so that can lead to a lot of problems. So we need to have educational campaigns to decrease the use of over-the-counter cough and cold medications in infants. The other thing is we have noticed that in our media there are a lot of advertisements for cough syrups. I think we as professionals should raise an objection to this through the IMA or IAP and have these stop because they can do a lot of harm. If a child is coughing, he needs to be seen. Home remedies. There was a study which was done and honey was found to be most favorably used by parents for symptomatic relief for a child's nocturnal cough, especially if it was due to upper respiratory symptoms. So that's something which fits in with our traditional values also, and when we tell them honey, they always feel very happy that you're giving a home remedy which they are familiar with. Now the final bottom line is, despite the well-known limitation of case series method, this is a 100 cough study done by somebody in 2008, and the message that he is saying is that once you have ruled out life-threatening conditions like pneumonia, asthma, which can worsen and take the child's life, in most cases the cough is benign and will take its own course and recover it on its own. The point is whether the family physician should mention that there is no effective treatment for most acute cough is another matter, because then the patient will not come to you but go to another physician who will prescribe a medicine which is not going to work in any case, but he doesn't tell the patient that it's not going to work. So that is another thought. And our Indian study, again, I am sharing this, it's not directly related to this talk, but I think we must be aware of it. Why do we write irrational prescriptions? Firstly, those which are not related to money, parental demand and anxiety. And the solution for this is spending more time with the parent and explaining to them more carefully so that you can counsel them. And of course, this benefits only the finance of the companies. We need quick fixes because of lack of time, parents and doctors. Doctor, I am working, I can't take off again, so you please cure this cough in the next 10 minutes. That is the usual story that I am given. So they don't have time. Doctor's problem is that he's got 150 OPD patients waiting out. He also has to go eat food, go home, meet his family, so he's also in a rush. Doctor's lack of experience and training contributing to lack of conviction in rational prescribing. Of course, this does not hold to this audience because you are all amazing. Doctor's lack of peer support. If I don't do it, my colleague will do it, and then all the patients will go to him and I will starve and I will sit on the roadside and I will not be able to do anything. We don't have treatment protocols. We have treatment protocols for acute severe asthma. We don't have a treatment protocol for simple URI, which is most needed, which you are going to see every day. We don't have a simple treatment protocol of how to counsel a parent who's got a watery diarrhea. We will talk about complex diseases. So we should focus on that. We don't have audit systems, wrong or incomplete information to the doctors, especially by our friendly neighborhood medical rep, paucity of independent non-partisan research where drugs are concerned, that is also severely lacking, but things are changing now. With our ethics committees coming into the play, your study has to be approved for all these things. We are worried about increasing litigations, but the solution against increasing litigations is again time with the patient and talking to them. If you spend time with them, if you talk to them, you explain the disease and you are polite, they are unlikely to take you to court. So don't worry about that. And lack of understanding of ill effects of overprescription. You know, we were discussing in the car yesterday that I know of doctors who prescribe 6 or 7 drugs. And I asked Rajesh, would they do it for their own child also? And he said, yes, they truly believe these drugs work, so they would write it for their own kid also. So they are not only aware of that this could be an irrational thing, and that needs to be. And of course, all of us have our patients who, with the next episode of a respiratory infection, go to the chemist with your old prescription, take the same drugs, give it for 5 days, come back and say, your drugs are useless, not working, doctor. So we know this. Only in our country, this is a major issue. Monetary benefits, I'll go through this thing. We don't want to lose our patient by defining the trend. How are we placed time-wise? Can I take 2 minutes to give a story now? This trend business I want to share with you. There was a colleague of ours who went into practice, who had studied with sir and all of us, and then I met him at a social gathering and I said, how are things going? He said, you all talk on a podium and tell about not using antibiotics. I use on every patient. I said, why? What happened? I mean, all this, classify bacterial, viral, and what happened to all that? He said, no, if I don't prescribe, my neighboring fellows will prescribe and everybody is using the same thing. So I told him a story that there are very few conditions where you must do what everyone else is doing. If you recall, many years back, there was a politician who was very strong on family planning and men were being caught and vasectomized randomly. So there was a village in Haryana where this procedure was going on and all the males had been vasectomized. It was the last day of the camp and they were winding up when an 88-year-old gentleman came to the camp and said, I want my vasectomy done too. So they asked him, what is wrong with you? Why do you want it? He said, no, you have vasectomized all the males in my village. If a single lady gets pregnant, I will be blamed. So only in situations like this, you do what everyone else is doing. Otherwise, please defy the trend and use your own mind. Doctors' unwillingness to lose a patient by suggesting a stigmatizing or a chronic problem. We hesitate to tell them that your child has got asthma. We are anxious to tell them that he'll run away from us and try fish therapy somewhere or something else. And of course, some of us have the desire to please pharma companies. I know when I went through this list, I felt very unhappy. And I think we all need to introspect and improve on whatever thing is lacking. Finally, having said all this, how many of you have tolerated your own severe cough patiently for nature to work without attempting any remedies? Is there anyone who does that? These are probably very few, but most of us would take a medication. My plea to you would be, when you take a medication or you prescribe a medication, think about the nature of your cough and give it rationally. Don't give a combination. Till we get this was, just post the H1N1 swine flu epidemic first time in Mumbai. A Sunday Times article had this. We need a super lozenge to fix everything, all these problems. And till we have a drug like this, you pop it and all types of coughs just vanish. We'll have to continue practicing rationality. And with that, you need education of medical professionals and parents. You need conviction in your own beliefs. You need time to counsel the parents who come to you. You need to give them symptomatic relief. You can't be idealistic and say, oh no, this cough is not going to go. I'll treat the basic disease, let the child suffer. We have to give symptomatic relief. Because when the patient's choice is to decide between doctor A and B, if you are rational, you are effective, and you are considerate and compassionate, he will always choose you over anyone else. Thank you so much.
The session is thrown out to the audience. They can ask questions. Any questions to the speaker?
What's the current status of antihistamine pseudoephedrine combination or decongestant combination for post-nasal drip induced cough? Is it recommended today or
I don't use it, sir. I only use first generation antihistaminics with the understanding that they will work only in 30% of my patients. Yes, that's which is associated with the wheeze.
Oh, I mean associated with the wheeze,
Yes.
not any particular type of
No.
cough.
So
We are done. Thank you.
Yeah.